All right, for the second story of the day, we're going to go to the Wall Street Journal. We're going to do another economy finance story, which is TD Bank probe tied to laundering of illicit fentanyl profits. The Canadian bank is contending with three other U.S. probes into its anti-money laundering controls. So this story is of particular interest to me because I live in Boston, Massachusetts. And I also worked in the banking industry. And generally speaking, before we delve into the specifics of this article, I think there is not enough training of employees. There is not enough days, and considering my banking background, there's not enough days where someone actually comes into the office and says, this is very important. This is how you report fraud. This is how you do this, this, and this. They'll give you these trainings that you click through online. They're like, you have to finish it in 30 days, get to it. Just click through and blah, 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 blah. Like, the focus and the intention on actually preventing money laundering and preventing financial crimes is way less than it should be. So, as somebody that lives in Boston, where the TD Garden is, even though this is a Canadian bank, where the TD Garden is, and yeah, it's great. It's great that we have the TD Garden, and we're talking about, how what a fantastic institution for our basketball team, our local basketball team, to play in when, they're laundering fentanyl profits. It's like when I walk by Harvard and you see the Sackler building where they've made billions of dollars off of fentanyl, and then they'll get charged with a little fine. So the investigation was launched after agents uncovered an operation in New York and New Jersey that laundered hundreds of millions of dollars in proceeds from illicit narcotics through TD and other banks, according to court documents, people familiar with the matter. In that case, at least one other prosecutor also alleged the criminals bribed TD employees. So let's get into the numbers here. Also, TD's anti-money laundering practices have been under scrutiny for years. Okay, why hasn't this been regulated? Why are we saying, okay, private bank, your money laundering practices are weak. Let's not do anything about that. Let's just ignore the fact that your money laundering practices are weak. Something that, hey, maybe you should focus on as a bank. And again, as somebody that has now worked for two banks, and I'm not going to name names here because I don't want to get sued, but somebody that's worked for two banks, they give you training, and I worked with monies, and I worked with customers, and someone could have just been, giving us laundered funds. Our training on anti-money laundering practices were not, hey, somebody coming in and telling us you need to do this, this, and this. This is very serious. It's highly serious. You know what our trainings were? Our trainings were, hey, you have to finish this in 30 days. It's you click the link and it pops up, and everyone does it on the side. And people usually do it on the last day, and they do 8 hours of these quote-unquote trainings while they're also answering emails and moving money. So no one takes these things seriously when they're very, very, very serious, because the company culture does not prioritize them, and everyone's just there for a goddamn paycheck. So let's see some specifics here. The bank said Tuesday that in addition to the Justice probe, it is the subject of three other anti-money laundering investigations in the U.S. Jesus. Okay. Fraud is their business model. TD set aside $450 million to resolve one of those inquiries and said it expects additional penalties. So this is how this works, right? TD Bank will cut corners on its anti-money laundering policies. Like every single bank, they'll just have these, electronic trainings for their employees. They won't take it seriously. They won't actually put the time, money, effort, and energy into making sure that their company doesn't launder money, because guess what? Laundering money is actually probably good for their banking operations. They make money from that. So they're not going to actually have real money laundering practices in place. They're going to end up laundering money. And then at the end of the day, there's going to be a fine. This is $450 million. But you know what? Over all of the money laundering practices over the entire bank, they made a couple bill. So there's $450 million fine. Not really much. This is how these companies operate. They say the fine is not going to be as much as how much we made from the malpractice, so we'll just pay the fine. Here we go again. On Thursday, a Canadian banking regulator fined TD the equivalent of $6.7 million for failing to file suspicious activity reports and document risks related to money laundering and terrorist activity, among other things. $6.7 million is nothing to a bank. Let's see, 397 billion Canadian dollar company. So again, these fines are just pennies to the amount of money, to the size of these businesses. They'll be just fine, because that's how these people operate. Now, let's get into this article a little bit more. The issues have already stalled TD's ambitious expansion plans. The economy based off of mergers and acquisitions and moving money from here to there. Keep in mind, 95% of mergers and acquisitions fail to create value. So TD built one of the largest U.S. regional banks over the past 2 decades with a flurry of acquisitions. Early last year, it was on the cusp of extending its reach into the Southeast with a $13.4 billion deal to buy Tennessee's First Horizon. But regulators' concerns over how TD tracked and flagged suspicious customers' transaction help scuttle the deal. Let's put it this way. Is anyone going to go to jail for this? Is any C-suite executive going to go to jail for this? The answer is obviously no. There will be no C-suite executive go to jail for this. There will be no one of note go to jail for this. Maybe some low-level, the bankers will go to jail, or they'll just get fined. But these are operations in the hundreds of millions of dollars, in the billions of dollars, and it's fraud as a business model because the fines will be less than the amount of money you make from the fraud, and people will get fired and no one will go to jail. But if you have a gram of weed in your car and you're driving through Alabama, have fun being in jail for 20 years. This is how this country works. It protects these guys. They can have fraud as their business model. They can actually get caught and no one goes to jail. Now, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. All right, that's the story.